So, really looking forward to seeing our speakers today. Ruth Davies, NAHT President no less this year. And what a year to be President of the NAHT. And I cannot think of a better person to steer us through this year than Ruth. So Ruth is a very experienced head teacher. And of course will continue to be so when her presidency ends. And Hannah Tudor, another very experienced head teacher, who's also an author actually of a course on the Pathway programme. Delighted to speak to Hannah as well. So it just remains really for me to say welcome and hi to Ruth and Hannah. I hope you're there. It's great if you can join us. There we are. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, hi.
And hello, Ruth.
Hello,
the technology
hi.
Works. We never quite know. We always kneel at the altar of technology on days like today. And eventually we'll be holding these round tables in person, and I can't wait for one.
Absolutely. Great.
Well, it's great to see you. Shall we get straight into the questions? Because I know we're going to have a lot of questions and comments from our brilliant attendees as well. So why don't we start, Ruth, if I may, why don't you perhaps spend a couple of minutes just to describe some of the challenges faced by your staff this year?
Well, I think one of the main challenges is around the need to be continually reactive, where as practitioners and school leaders especially, we love a long-term plan. We love the developmental elements of our job, and we love to make sure that we maintain the right context for those plans. And of course, this year, circumstances have taken those opportunities away from us and forced us into a very reactive sort of mode. And that has been a challenge, because we know that, distant though it might seem at the moment, there will be a post-COVID time. And it may not look like the time we had pre-COVID, but it will need the same kind of mental processes to address the challenges. We don't know the circumstances under which we will be welcoming back the majority of our children to school. They will, we know, have experienced grossly varying activities and experiences and circumstances then within lockdown, and we need to be match fit for that as well. And so I think one of the greatest challenges has been just to be able to keep our eye on the ball and remember that there will be a post-COVID time that calls us again to be creative about the developmental stuff that actually makes the biggest difference. I've said repeatedly, there's nothing like compliance management to suck the life out of the job. Risk assessments, health and safety, I have to confess, they leave me a little cold at the best of times. But of course, these circumstances this year have forced these considerations to the forefront. So I think the challenge has been to maintain obviously your safe settings, but as well to maintain that long-term ambition to return to the developmental elements of our jobs that we know actually breed the best life chances and opportunities for our pupils and their families.
That makes perfect sense to me, Ruth, that when you're in the weeds of the operational demands and so forth and wading your way through a period of uncertainty, really, lack of certainty and control, one of the biggest challenges must surely have been to maintain that wider perspective and that longer term view. And do you recognise that, Hannah?
Absolutely, Ruth. I could not agree more. I think schools, regardless of setting, are innovative places of creativity and ideas, and teachers naturally are motivated by making things better. And the last 10 months haven't been a time to say, I've had a really good idea about, or shall we try, or let's develop this. It's been about keeping safe. And actually, for me personally, the challenge of not knowing what I'm doing. I've never led a school through a pandemic before, and suddenly all eyes are on you to say, lead us, what are we going to do? And the challenge of going to bed at night thinking, I really hope that decision that I made at lunchtime today was the right one.
Wow.
Isn't about innovation. It isn't what motivates us. It's become, a challenging world about with doubt and anxiety in it at times. And so absolutely right, Ruth, we have to look ahead to the time after this. And no, it won't always be like this. And actually schools will be innovative, creative places again, post-COVID, and I cannot wait.
And I know that's what motivates you, isn't it? And that's what you're so good at. And what about some of I'm quite interested to, maybe it's just my eternal optimism, I think, which can be a source of great irritation to some, I think, but I'm interested in focusing on some of the skills and qualities that you think some of your colleagues will have gained never mind lost, but gained in the last 12 months? And how might they have grown? What, if I can come to you first, Ruth, what do you think?
Well, Andrew, you know my passion for these measured risks.
I know.
Yeah, high risk, low blame cultures. Well,
That's
we've
right.
been granted an opportunity because quite often, exactly as Hannah has said, we find ourselves confronted with situations that, guess what, we've never met before either. No one else has got the answers. And so we've had the opportunity to really test out those creative solutions. Now, whether those creative solutions surround the day-to-day health and safety management of our settings, or remote learning opportunities, or general staff and pupil well-being, it's given us the chance to really test out our thinking and our beliefs and our core values, really, around, you know, long may it continue. Long may it continue. Let us continue to ask, does assessment and accountability need to look like this? It hasn't looked like that in the last year. And you know what? We may be better for it. Is, you know, are our settings 21st century match fit, if you like? You know, are we really leading organisations that are forward facing? And it has this pandemic and this period of crisis actually presented us with an opportunity to do something different, not just in response to the COVID crisis, but something differently forever. I hope it's given us confidence amongst the general public, amongst our administrations. I think schools have proved themselves to be at the heart of their communities. Guess what? It was never all about education after all. We kind of knew that. We knew we were at the centre
that's so
of
true.
communities, and we have had to flex our muscles and find new resilience levels and new skills and new knowledge that we never even knew we needed before. And we've come through it, and we've made mistakes and errors along the way, but we have built really strong communities and strong trust amongst the families that we serve. And I think going forward, it would be good, well, it would be foolish for us to ignore the advances that we've made, but it would be good to remember to continually build on those renewed connections then, and to really challenge administrations who perhaps at times seek to take the power away from teachers, and just to remind them that actually, as evidenced over the last 10 months in particular, teachers and school leaders bring with them a very specific skill base and knowledge that can be applied for a longer term strategy. Let's never go back to the way things were. Let's always question why we do it and what impact it's likely to have.
Absolutely. So, I mean, perspective is key, isn't it, as we enter a cultural rethink, a cultural reset. That's fascinating, and I think that the narrative, understandably and necessarily, has been rather negative in terms of what has been lost, and in terms of that awful phrase catch up, and I get that, and today is about the teachers rather than the students perhaps, but I do love your positive narrative, Ruth, whenever we speak, as to what we've gained, what we've grown, how we've grown. Hannah, do you recognise similar sort of growth and gains in your staff, if I can spin it like that?
I've absolutely been amazed by my staff, and everybody that I've spoken to in a leadership role has said their teaching staff, their support staff have blown them away with their resilience, their determination, their honesty, the fact that they've come to me saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. How are we going to put all of this online? How do we teach children in the classroom and at home? And the kind of joy of being in the position that we're in as leaders, when you've got staff that can come to you and openly say and be honest and say, I can't do this. How are we going to work it through? And you know, as you know, Andrew, my pathway course is focused about not getting complacent and always looking for the next kind of opportunity to improve. And actually, it is. At school, we were, you know, our school in person runs in such a way that everybody knows the intricacies of how our school works on a day-to-day basis. And COVID has just taken all of that and thrown it up in the air.
Wow.
And now suddenly we had a very short amount of time at the beginning of this term to relaunch remote learning. And our staff are very much used to the rhythm and the daily walking through of our school day and how our school works. We're not used to putting that online. And so we had a big challenge. And as much as I've just said, you know, it hasn't been a time for innovation, the challenge of putting a school remotely online needs innovation. And they have been wonderfully innovative and creative in how they've engaged the children and and almost sort of sensed when engagement was slipping and thought about how they can get that engagement back. And I've actually seen a new kind of lease of life to them. Don't get me wrong, they cannot wait for the 8th of March until it's over, but they've enjoyed having to really think about their practice again, challenge themselves, think about how they motivate the children. And that I've seen has led to a different form of creativity, not necessarily the creativity we would see in school in person, but the creativity to redesign learning in the curriculum, to put it online and keep children motivated and interested, has been a massive challenge, but has been one that they've wholeheartedly followed, because they've got that relentless belief and value that they want to get it right. It's about every child, and it's about giving the best to every child. And that's still come through, even though we haven't been in school. And that's been great to see.
Superheroes. Complete
yes,
superheroes, aren't they?
All of
them
them
they really are. Call it what it is. So, I mean, you've been on the phone and virtuals this past year, Ruth, with thousands of members of the NAHT in your role as president, thank goodness. And as I said in introduction, without wishing to embarrass you, I can't think of a better person to support head teachers through this period. Do you recognise, first of all, do you recognise really what Hannah was saying? And then after, perhaps if we can then move into ways in which both yourself and your colleagues across the NHT have been supporting the whole teacher. I'm very interested in that as well in this past few months.
Exactly as Hannah says, I've been absolutely blown away by not just the resilience, but the levels of commitment and the determination to keep going and to keep reaching for that level of excellence in terms of what their pupils and their families needed, often in the face of their own trials and tribulations. You know, we all come from families as well, and we all have personal, issues back at home that need, and I know so many of our members will have been juggling so many balls over the last year and managing their own fears and their own disappointments and loss. And yet they have, they have continued to lead those teams, and similarly the teams have kept going, as Hannah has said, even in the face of extreme challenge. They have found not just a resilience, but a boldness that we kind of always knew was there, but we've never really been afforded the opportunity to flex those muscles before. And I think, if anything, in coming forward, what it's sort of really raised for us, and I've got to say as well, remember that we're across 3 nations, and for a small country, we're not making it hard for ourselves. We've got 3 nations, we're all doing it differently, but with that central theme of there has to be a plan, and it has to, at every single second of every minute of every day, be focused on the learner. And whatever our decisions are taken, we have to have that continually as our driving light and at the centre. And I think that has come through. That has come through in the way in which schools have worked beyond their school gates to ensure that at times these children are fed, they're clothed, they're housed in some situations, and just to continue to make those links, especially in situations where perhaps agencies have had to disappear into the background a little bit. And so we have seen a whole new level of boldness and resilience and commitment, which we kind of always knew were there, but it's been there, shiny and bright at the forefront, with that smile. Sometimes the smile was painted on and masked a lot of personal difficulties behind it, but it, never once have we come across a situation where anybody is ready to give up. They might feel it inside, but they have kept going. And I will just say that the one thing that has come out in it, and we do need to pick this up and run with it and think about it post-COVID, that again, the last person that a school leader will think about is themselves.
I know.
Yeah, and now this isn't unfamiliar territory to us, and it is something, Andrew, that you and I have spoken about before. This belief that we have to keep going whatever, and that if we wobble, then the whole ship wobbles. So we do paint the smile on sometimes and square those shoulders, and in we go. And even with the strongest senior leadership team around you and the strongest governors or trustees around you, can still be that very lonely job when the ultimate decision falls onto your shoulders. And I think going forward, we have to look at a model for supporting school leaders in what can be and will be in the future at times an incredibly lonely, challenging and threatening role at times. And we have to, I think, as a body of school leaders, remember that actually, looking after our own well-being, it doesn't need excuses, doesn't need justifying.
So how
you put your own mask on first before you can save others, and I think in going forward, that is the real challenge for the profession, to ensure that school leaders understand that it's a virtue. It's not a luxury to look after yourself first, because your own well-being is what everybody else depends upon.
And I couldn't agree more. And before I come to Hannah, which I fully intend to, I'm just interested, just to stay with you, Ruth, for a little bit, just to look into how you would help your staff. How would you provide a safe place for your staff in which they can share their vulnerability? Because that's the key bit for me here. And you gain strength from that. But how do you do that in a discussions, team meetings? How do you do that?
Well, I think that the period of crisis and pandemic has taught us that we have to, that even the strongest schools with the strongest sense of core ethos and shared belief, they've been tested. Our principles have been tested. And so if I flick back to a pre-COVID time, I think in terms of how you react to a crisis really depends on how strong those roots were predating the crisis. And I think in terms of moving forward, you know, we talk about in general terms the need for this opportunity for us to have rights respecting communities where everyone just knows their value. And that, you know, that we get into place those core beliefs and ethos so that people feel safe. You're creating safe spaces for people to come in. That doesn't mean to say you're creating spaces that will never know challenge or threat. No, but if you were crafting a staff, and you know, as a school leader, your most expensive resource is your staff, so that's where you start and finish from. And you know, you craft that staff and you craft that sense of shared belief and an understanding that over times you have to change and refine and adapt. And what you want to do is to be able to do two things really. So you're looking for that individuality at all times, because we're not automatons, we are not robots. We want to bring our personality into the setting, but at the same time there's that one golden thread that joins us all together, and it's the belief that we want to leave each other feeling better than when we first met each other. And I think to help to ensure a staff sort of grows within that nurturing environment is a fundamental requirement really, and that's how you build. So I'm not a great believer in stuff, Andrew, you know that, you know, sometimes activities and additional stuff, you know, is needed. But whatever the strategies or plans or projects or themes or topics you follow, if the roots aren't grounded in solid principles, then you are left floundering. And so I think this crisis has really tested those foundations into so many of our settings. And I think in coming out of those settings, I hope what we've learned is that the most important resource in any school is the quality of the relationships that are there. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is worth surrendering those relationships. No off-site visit, no pending assessment, no accountability. Nothing is worth surrendering. The belief that actually what is really important and what will actually impact on our learners the most is the quality of the relationships that we generate every day. That doesn't mean to say you always agree. And, you know, in my school, you usually get towards the end of the Christmas term and we're all exhausted and we're all a little bit grumpy with each other. But you know what I mean? It's building those settings. And if we want children to learn, then we have to provide those similar safe settings for their teachers to similarly grow and develop. And ultimately, you want to create a setting where everybody, not just the children, but the adults, want to turn up every day as well.
I couldn't agree more. Does that resonate with you, Hannah? I suspect from knowing you a little bit, that does.
Hugely.
How are you supporting all of your staff? You know,
so many powerful things that you said there, Ruth, that I 100% agree with. And that to me should be what all leaders are about. Creating environments where everybody feels that they feel emotionally and physically safe, nurtured, valued, and they feel that they belong. And I think it's as important for the staff and the adults as it is for the children. Before COVID, we talk, you know, people would say, oh, the ethos of your school, Hannah, or the culture of your school, tell me about it. I don't know. We just come and visit. I always used to say, come and visit, because I didn't know how to explain it. Why are these things important to us? I don't know. It's just what makes us us. But actually, I've learned that the culture and the ethos of the school is so much more than the building that you rock up to every day, because it is existed when we all cannot be together. It's the thing that we've missed the most. And as much as we've missed not seeing each other every day and seeing the children every day, we've also reached out for different ways to keep connected. And that to me has shown me that the staff really value the culture and the values that we live and work by, because they've continued to live and work by them, even though they're not physically in school every day with 30 children. They're working remotely, or we're sort of in all different places. So I think this has given us an amazing opportunity to really bring into sharp focus why we do the things that we do. If there are leaders out there now that are thinking, I don't really know why we do the things that we do, or we now do them differently, then I would say good, question that, and keep questioning why you're doing the things that you're doing, because I think it makes us see really clearly what is important.
One of the things you said, Hannah, when we very first met her, which seems like another world, doesn't it really? It was only about a year ago, just bizarre really. But I remember I was really struck by how refreshingly honest you were about your own vulnerability and your own motivation, whatever. And I remember you saying, because obviously you've taken your school with your and you would always say it's a team effort, I know you would, right up to outstanding, and that was an epic journey. But I remember I was struck by, you said, one of the first things you said to me was, yeah, but I've never been more vulnerable now. Do you model that then? I mean, not every day, but you're honest with your staff to show them that you have your vulnerability too. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Right.
I always say leadership is about having just the right amount of answers to stay credible, but never professing to have them all. And yes, I think leaders put themselves in a very dangerous position when they say, don't worry, I've got the answer. And I think that makes our staff feel that, oh my goodness, they're so much better than me, they can do it and I can't. And actually, I walk into classrooms in our school, and I watch teachers teach, and I just think, wow. That is amazing. And I learn so much from being in those classrooms. And I'm not afraid to say that. You know, I love being in your room today. I learned so much that, you know, I love how you did X, Y, and Z. So there is that level of vulnerability, and then it's knowing when the time is right to have the answers. And I would say in this lockdown that we've just been through now, I've developed a leadership style that I didn't really know that I had. I've become a little bit of a lioness and a little bit protective of teachers and school and why we do the things that we do, because I think teachers have been very vulnerable in that our profession has been opened up to households across the nation. Parents have become quite vulnerable because they feel, oh my goodness, now I'm home educating my children and what will the teacher think? And suddenly there is this transparency that hasn't been there before. And I think I've had to be really clear, working with the team to get the remote learning offer right for us, and again coming back to our ethos and our values and knowing our community, what will work for our community, and then being really clear as a leader about this is how we are going to manage remote learning at our school. This is what you will expect to see. And that, because I think there was a time when it could have become quite critical of teachers who weren't offering what certain parents thought they should be offering. And so the only way that I thought we could manage that at school is if I said, this is what we're going to do. And I very quickly came up with those answers, and then felt the need to protect the staff. Right. If those answers weren't quite what people were looking for. So it's knowing, I think, when to have the answers and when to say, I don't have the answer to this particular problem. We need to think about this together. So it's a balance, I think, of bolshiness and vulnerability.
Yes, it is.
I am quite bolshy, as you know, Andrew.
I wouldn't have, charismatic, I think is probably the word. Charismatic. So, I mean, looking ahead, thank you, Hannah. Looking ahead, Ruth, we hear a lot about the phrase, we hear the phrase quite rightly, continuity of learning over the last 12 months, and parity of provision and equal access and so forth. And I'm really interested in continuity of culture. How have you managed, well, I understand that you've obviously been in the role of NAHT president in this last 12 months, so you have brilliant staff who've continued that in your own school, but I'm sure you've been involved. But how have you continued the culture, and which elements of your culture do you feel have saved people? And what about this cultural reboot? What will your priorities be moving forward?
I think
two questions really.
Yeah, to flip that on its head, I think it's the culture that's actually carried us through. It's the culture, it's our core beliefs that we almost thought it was all about the children, but boy, has the last 10 months showed that actually it is every single decision. So it's not so much about how do we blend a new culture out of this. It's about what did we already know. It's made us bolder. It's made us bolder about our choices. And I think in terms of going forward as well, it's made us a little bit more reflective, because in terms of equal opportunity, and that's what we're all about in the schools. So we, you know, in terms of inclusion and diversity, we have focused for so long on ensuring that everyone has the same opportunity, and surely the pandemic has really drawn a very sharp spotlight on the disparities of opportunities amongst our learners and their families. But it's also, for us, it's raised an awareness that it's not just all about the equal opportunities. It's actually being very careful to monitor the equity of outcome as well. That sometimes, if I'm reflective now, I can think that perhaps my own organisation, my own school is focused perhaps too heavily on equal opportunity and making sure that everybody has the right option to access everything they need, and perhaps I haven't monitored as closely as I should have equity of outcome. And I think going forward for us as a culture, you know, in terms of the next step for us as a culture, we think of ourselves as an inclusive and diverse and responsive setting. But going forward, I think I need to be challenging myself as the lead, and then the setting as a whole, in terms of what sound and firm foundations are we building so that all children can not just come to us and feel welcome and, you know, and empowered, but what are we doing for them when they leave? When they walk out of the door for the last time, how have I ensured, I've known how to ensure that how to get them in equal fashion. What foundations am I laying to ensure that when they leave me, that the outcome that they take with them is equitable amongst them?
That's really interesting, because whenever we've spoken, it's always been abundantly apparent to me your passion and commitment to diversity and to inclusion and equal opportunity, and rooting out some of the unconscious bias that perhaps they might be seated in all of us to a degree. But what you're looking at there is equal aspiration as well for everybody, and how you instill that.
Yeah, it's not enough just to have the same opportunity for everyone to come in. You have to challenge ourselves. Why do some children make a lot of that opportunity? So they all have the same
true. And others don't.
But why do some go on to maximise those opportunities and some don't? What are the obstacles? What are the institutional obstacles that are set in their ways? And that is quite an ambition for schools, I know, because we are limited in terms of our impact beyond the school gates, but it's a challenge for us as well. And it is something, in terms of the change of culture, it's something that I've started to reflect on and think about. I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly something I will be giving a lot of thought to in the coming months and years.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And Hannah, I know you're equally passionate about the culture of your school, and it's the culture of your school that I'm sure has brought everybody through this. What are the learns that you've had, and what perhaps might your priorities be, and have they changed in the months ahead from a cultural point of view?
I think it's been really empowering for me to be able to take a little bit of a step back, and see the culture and ethos of the school be as strong during lockdown as it was before, almost stronger. It's kind of pulled people through, and we know that these things are important, but you fall into the trap of believing that it is about the school and the place that we come to every day. And actually it's not. It's about, exactly as Ruth said earlier, the principles and the beliefs that we all hold in. And actually what has driven the teachers is the belief that these children, okay, we're not in an easy situation, but they can still learn, they can still make good progress, we can still provide good learning opportunities. And that culture and that culture of aspiration to get it right for every child, as many as they possibly can during this really challenging time, has really come through to the fore. So I come back refreshed that I think the things that we held dear before, we still hold dear now. because they were the things, they were almost the life buoys when we were drowning, saying, this is what we're holding on to, this is what we are about. And we didn't let them go when things got rough. So they must be the right things. I'm looking forward to coming back though and putting a sharper focus on that. I'm looking forward to speaking to staff about what they learned through the process of lockdown and providing remote learning. Do they feel they developed as a teacher? Everybody's sort of saying, oh, I can't wait to get rid of it. But actually, once we reflect on it a little bit, what do they feel it brought to the fore? Equally as much, we've had challenging times in lockdown where it has been all about the teaching and learning of the children. And I will be very careful when we go back to think about what things I factor in alongside that, because do all of those things that were there before still need to be there now? And what are our views about that? Can we sort of start by perhaps stripping some things back and making life a little bit easier for ourselves?
Yeah.
Some questions. I think what actually has happened is we've been given a really awesome opportunity to reflect. And I'm not sure if now's the right time to be doing it. It might come in a few months' time, but definitely a time to just take a step back. And we say as a staff, we are going to look back and think, wow, we did that, didn't we? That was hard at the time, but wow, we did that. And we have done it, and we should be really proud that we've done it.
So how will you balance then, Hannah, the overwhelming need to maybe not reevaluate and revisit, I'm probably wrong to say that, but to reinforce the values and beliefs that kind of underpin, and the assumptions that underpin your culture, and really bring that center stage at the same time as coping with the overwhelming need, as we've read this week in the media and so forth, from a government level to catch up. So, and then they seem almost mutually exclusive to me, because one is a slightly more kindly approach. That's unfair, actually. Children have an entitlement to catch up. But do you know what I mean? How are you going to balance those?
And I don't know if this is hugely naive, but right. I think if we get the first bit right, we think about the culture, we get ourselves in the right mindset, and we hang on to what we believe, the rest will happen.
Right.
So 5 years ago, our school was inadequate. Children were very, very far behind, had lost out on a lot of learning time. And 4 years later, those same children attended an outstanding school because we'd caught them up. So I think if we can do that, because we focused on the culture.
Yeah.
And I think we need, and we've made our promise to ourselves at school, we are going to not use the term catch up, because we need to find out first if these children do need to catch up, which children do, which children don't, and catching up to what, you know, I heard someone say the other day, well, children need the right support to make good progress, but that's what we do. That's our job. We do that all the time. And I think if the culture is right, the climate's right, I think those two things are not mutually exclusive. They happen, one happens because of the other.
Amen. Do you think, Ruth, your thoughts on that, Ruth? I'd be very interested to hear.
100%, 100%. Yes, you know, we achieve because of, not in spite of. As exactly as Hannah said, you know, getting the culture right, it's not an optional extra, it's absolutely fundamental. And this is why I, like Hannah, I react so strongly to this call for catch-up. Catch-up to who? They've all been off. If the measures are wrong, change the measures. But let us get on with our core job. This is what teaching is about. I think if the community has learned anything, if mums and dads and families have learned anything perhaps over the last 10 months, is how complex this business of teaching and learning actually is. But we've got this. It's our core business. Exactly as Hannah says, this is what we do. We work out where a child is, and we, you know, it's part of our daily bread and butter is to take a child from knowing very little to knowing quite a lot. It is what we do. And we understand that there are no two paths that are the same, that each pupil is an individual. They will need different paths to reach from A to B. And, you know, that the excellent teacher and the excellent leader understands the way in which those paths of progress, first of all, have to be audited and assessed, and, you know, in terms of the starting points being absolutely spot on. But we've done it, you know, it is what we're about, as Hannah said. So my message would be threefold, really. Number one, get out of our way and let us get on with the job. Number two, resource us, because this isn't going to happen on a shoestring.
Right.
And then thirdly, just support us, because this, whatever, I prefer to call it recovery. I can't stand the phrase catch up. It's not going to happen overnight or over a weekend or over a summer school. It's going to take a while, because when I'm talking about recovery, obviously, I'm not just talking about making progress in academic terms. It's looking at the deficit that the children will be coming back to us with regards to their own well-being and the experiences that they will have had of lockdown. That loss of control of their routines, of who they see. They will have lost family members. They won't have been able to see friends, and they haven't interacted with people. They've not gone on day trips or holidays. They've not had the choice to go to the park, perhaps, or, you know, whatever, you know, birthday parties. All the usual things that are part of their growing up have been taken away from them. And so we have to be absolutely clear that these, just as the shall I have a good culture or not a good, strong culture in my school, it's not an optional extra. Similarly, we have to be very mindful that in bringing these children back to anywhere near the starting points that we would want them to, first and foremost, we have to look at their well-being and what our plans are in place, what plans are in place for us to ensure that first and foremost, they come back to us and they are reminded of just how special and important they are to us.
I was struck I completely agree, and I can see Hannah nodding. I was struck last night on the news. I don't know why I watched the news, but the very significant amount of money that's been put into catch-up classes and so forth. And I maybe it was just the reporting rather than the intention behind the money, but I was struck by how that was very much focused on catch-up classes for you know, the measurable attainment and progress, and how little, at least that was featured in the news report, was how some of that money should be spent on a more holistic approach. Do you know what I mean? It seemed, maybe I was misunderstanding, but that money was going to be used to pay private tutors to bring the children up to speed with their English and maths. Am I being cynical there?
I'm thinking, you know,
it's important.
Is not what happens when people who have never stepped foot into the classroom as a teacher, as a practitioner, start to make the rules for it. We know that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. No two children will come back to school with exactly the same experiences and the same starting points. No two children will have reacted in the same way to lockdown, and no two children will react in the same way to whatever the next step looks like.
Absolutely.
Which is why, you know, I think as a country, as administrations, we need to be more respectful of the enormous skill and experience base that our school staff bring with them into, we are well equipped for this job. We've got this, we can do it.
We've got it.
But we need to be given freedom to exercise, you know, we need to make the rules, we need to set the standards. You know, it's common sense.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm sorry to jump in. Shall we conclude with perhaps a couple of minutes from both of you? And I'll come to you first, if I may, Hannah, on, if I may say, some suggestions for what perhaps might be the first 2 or 3 jobs that the head teachers may wish to do, notwithstanding no one's been anywhere. They've been there all along. So I don't mean when they come back. I'm not going to say when they come back, but you know what I mean, when there's a kind of a reset. What would you recommend might be those first few steps in their in-tray, should be their first priorities?
I've always said throughout this last 10 months that heads shouldn't be in offices writing COVID recovery catch-up plans, or, you know, that's not what this is about. We've got to be visible. We've got to be out. We've got to be seen by parents, by our staff, by our children. And, you know, I know we're still governed by protective measures, which make things very difficult, but I think we need to be visible, and we need to be walking the culture of our school every day for as much as possible. Sharing with people, you know, we're just thinking at the moment about how we are going to have conversations with staff around their experiences of lockdown, how they feel, because our teachers aren't just that's our year 6 teacher, they are mums and they've had to homeschool their own children, or their dads and they've had to homeschool their own children, and they suddenly, you know, we know that we've got staff that are looking after elderly relatives, or, you know, holistically we've got to think about our teachers as people and how the last 10 months have affected them.
Absolutely.
Some may have grown in confidence and think, wow, if I can teach remotely, I can do anything. Others, it may have affected their confidence, and they might be thinking, I'm unsure about coming back into the classroom, and we need to know where they are, and we need to be making sure they can show any vulnerability to us, because we talk a lot about catch up of children, but we've also got to have recovery for our staff. If we've got NQT+1 teachers, they've been through 2 lockdowns now, they've missed half their NQT year, and now they've missed an enormous chunk of their NQT+1 year and their opportunity to mix with other colleagues and shadow other people and watch other lessons, and all of those things have been curtailed through this. So we've got to make sure that our expectations, although remaining ambitious, are also realistic, fair and supportive, and that staff feel that they're supported to come back. And communication, it's always communication, isn't it? And if my teachers are watching this, I'll say, I cannot believe she's talking about communication, because it is always about communicating where we're going next, what's happening, and sometimes saying, I don't know, but let's find out what we're seeing from the children as they come back. So I would say the biggest thing for me is going to be visible and to be listening as much as I possibly can to what my staff are telling me.
Wow. Ruth, do you want to close?
Yeah, well, it's mindful as well that we're all the same, aren't we? You know, in any period of real challenge, we somehow keep going. It's sometimes the adrenaline kicks in, and we only really feel it after the pressure is off, or after that nasty period is over. And I think it's going to be same in going back to school. When we look at the resilience levels and all the magnificent skills that we've talked about this afternoon, that have been so much in evidence over the last 10 months, how have they kept going? The adrenaline has kept them going, the sense of what would happen, the jeopardy around what would happen if they didn't keep going. Once that pressure is off, I think it could have a physiological as well as an emotional impact on our staff, and you know, on school leaders as well. So perhaps my message is even stronger to school leaders than to school staff as well, to be mindful that the downtime that comes as the pressure starts to reduce, you know, we need to be ready to expect then sometimes suddenly almost not just a deflation, but a sense of, this is how I was meant to feel all through it, but I didn't have time to feel it. And so we need to be realistic about what that period of time coming back is going to look like. And the other thing I'm going to say as well, Andrew, which is, as you know, something that really bugs me, we have alluded to it, is the negative narrative that's around this generation that the media will persist in calling a lost generation.
Oh, God.
Our learners are listening to our conversation. They are listening to the narrative of the adults around them, the adults that have the charge. And we have a responsibility to remind them that they are not doomed. They're not lost. It's been a different path. It wasn't one we were expecting.
Absolutely.
But they are not lost. Their future is not doomed. They're in very, very safe hands. And I really think as a body of practitioners, we need to forge forward with this message and to kick back strongly. No, this is not a lost generation. They are not doomed. They have possibly even greater opportunity than they had before. But if we keep telling them they're lost, do you know what? They'll start to believe it. So let's down panic and start to just build that competence and just encourage everybody to look back at what has been achieved in 10 months, in the last 10 months, when, exactly as Hannah said, no training, no preparation. I mean, our schools were closed at a minute's notice and we had to switch to online learning. You know, you look at what we achieved within ridiculous timescales. Be prepared for a little bit normality returns. You know, because we're not going to be feeling match fit, and then just keep coming back to the idea as I know we will, keep reminding that those learners how important they are, and all is well. Remind them they were in safe hands before, they're in even safer hands if possible now, and the future is looking okay.
Couldn't have summed it up better. I mean, it's so lovely, and I think, if this discussion is anything to go by, the children really are in safe hands, are they not? They really are. Can I bring my children to your school? They're too old. They're too old now. Wow. Thank you ever so much. I'm sorry if we haven't got time for more questions, but I hope listeners will have valued as much as I have this one and understood why I wanted to stay with where we were. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Wow, we could go on for hours, couldn't we? And I wish we could. So thank you ever so much, Hannah, and thank you again, Ruth, for joining us in what was such an insightful conversation. I really hope we can do this again, maybe early next term. That would be interesting, wouldn't it, to get a view from the other side? That would be really nice, actually, because I'm very, very struck by the closing comments you made, Ruth, about the emotional, psychological, physiological effects that may follow when things have calmed down a bit, if that makes sense. And that makes perfect sense to me. So maybe we'll focus on that next time. Thank you ever so much.
Great to see you both.
Thank you.
Bye, Hannah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Great. My goodness, what a fascinating piece that was. And I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did.